Hello and welcome to Containment Breach 3-Minute Meets. I'm Christian DeMatteo, co-founder of Fugitive Poems, with tonight on a very special 3-minute meet. We are speaking with the great Patrick Hicks and Jack Van, and this is important. You've watched me doing these recordings.
The stage is set. You are
over a year.
So much.
This is the big one. This is the big one.
That his name is actually not what I've been advertising for a year and trying to get out there, but Jack Van Thomme.
This is what was holding me back from a greater social media following, was you mispronouncing. How are they going to search for me online if they're hearing Van Thomme?
People keep doing text to speech Google searches and getting nothing.
Give me Jack Van Thomme on Google. Actually, Google Plus. They're still big fans of that service. So yeah,
there were all these Marvel and DC execs that were like, "We got to get him!" Click, click, click. Nope.
Hey,
well, moving on.
I'm telling you, there's
blocky hands.
Todd McFarlane was like, "This Jack Van Thomme could take over Image." Well, can't find him online. Forget it.
Yeah,
that DeMatteo guy, that DiMatteo guy. See, anytime anyone says DiMatteo for my name, I'm like instantly like, "Nope, DiMatteo." So, ladies and gentlemen, the Jack Van Thomme, despite the presence of an H, I'm so excited because actually this is the first time that Jack and I have spoken face to face, as well as the first time that Patrick and I have spoken face to face. But the funny thing is, I've worked with Jack a number of times. You think that, the writer community, we're all part of the Comic Jam, the comicjam.com, which you want to get to. Even if you're not a comic creator, you want to get there for a great read every week. But you'd think that the writer community would really blossom and get close. But what happens is that each writer gets to know 30 artists and not speak to any other writers. So
not much readers there. You guys are looking at a lot of pictures and then just your own scripts. It's interesting.
Exactly. So Patrick, it is a pleasure. I have loved your Comic Jam stories.
Thank you.
And had a lot of fun working with you as well. So here we are. This is a very special episode of Containment Breach, Never 3-Minute Mates. So every book, as is obvious from what I just said, has its own umbrella theme, and creators are given all kinds of leeway to play in any kind of interpretation of that theme they want. But then what we do is we have every team come up with an individual creative prompt, and they send them to me, and I shuffle them around and redistribute the wealth. And everyone has to somehow incorporate whatever theme that they got into the story they're creating under the overall theme. Can you guys tell me, you guys came in as a team, so we didn't pair you. Can you guys tell me what the creative prompt you got was?
Our prompt was, I believe, the actual title of it was "The Sky's the Limit."
Okay.
Which, I believe when we started, because kind of the way that Jack and I work on things is like whenever there's like, a prompt or a theme or an idea or something like that, we'll just literally like spitball like one sentence worth of something back and forth. And then we'll just like either expand on that or, bounce off ideas back and forth. So we literally like took that sentence and just ran with it. Like, what can this sentence mean? So
yeah. There were a ton of good stories that we left on the table, and then just the one we put in there, it was kind of what was left over. It was just like the last idea. We're exhausted. This is got all the good ideas out of the way. Now it's time to just put something together for Christian and Fugitive Poems.
Mm-hmm.
Right. This is where all the refuse goes. Well, your refuse was resoundingly adequate. No, when I was bartending, I had a customer, whenever you'd ask him how his food would come out, how is it? He'd say resoundingly adequate. It's become one of my favorite phrases. What you came up with is terrific. So the phrase you got was "The sky's the limit." The theme of the book is of clouds and ether. Patrick, so we've got to say, you guys have known each other for a while, right? So you got a pretty good working relationship already, which is kind of cool because we've got people who've never even spoken before, or maybe never speak because it's all done via this, right? And they see what they come up with and how they learn to work together. You guys already have a method. So Patrick, you guys talk this out, you come up with an idea, and then you turn to one of my favorite things in the world. You don't know how happy I was when I found out what you were doing, because you turned to hermetics as your inspiration, and I was thrilled. Tell me a little bit about germinating the story. And we don't want to give away the farm either. But.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so the idea of it was we kind of, the idea of the story sort of came about based on just the actual theme, and the shape of the story overall came from there. But then, kind of the way I write, and especially when it's something sort of shorthand like this, I like to come up with kind of one specific hook, which is where sort of the language beats came in. And then from there, the story kind of took on sort of, its own little mythology where, we don't really get into the backstory of the world itself that deeply, but you can almost get a sense that like this is an alternate history where some things happened, but others didn't. And it is that sort of, not quite superstitious, but, there are arc words and guiding words to this society sort of a thing. So that kind of lent itself to the story and the approach and what happened, and sort of, relied on the characters to kind of reinforce that idea. But that's sort of where everything came from at the time.
And you'll see it too in some of the character designs. I will say, as a spoiler-free heads up, Patrick is excellent at building these backstories that are sort of implied. And the same thing will apply when you look at the costumes. Just know that a lot of the details on there are intentional. They have meaning. And if things seem inconsistent over time, there might be a meaning to that too. Might not always be on the page, but that's one of the fun things about working with someone you know so well, is that you can kind of get where they're going without having it be written in every single panel.
See, I know you and how talented you are and incredible you are. So I know that what you just said is legitimate and not the incredible excuse that it sounds like.
There
There
are texts back and forth. He'll pull the receipts. It's fine. He'll get the receipts. It's good. Don't worry.
That's one of the good things about like writing a script.
Wrong.
You take it over. Yeah. Because
I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. So kind of like just going back to the script, that's kind of one of the things that like, I can write the script, and when it's something short like this, some of the ideas kind of stay relegated to like big picture things, but I wouldn't take up panel space to kind of flesh them out. But then it turns out Jack can do that with like barely any prompting whatsoever, which is really what's good about, kind of the way we work. Is I come up with things, he fills in more gaps that I didn't even know existed because I wrote the script and everything's in my head, that kind of stuff.
That's huge. And that's been incredible as writing comics and working with artists, is you get to find out what gaps are in your reportage of your mind. And like James will ask me a question and I'll be like, well, obviously it's, did I not? Oh yeah, no. Oh yeah, I got that. Hold on.
Let me explain all the things I didn't actually say on the page here.
But you picked him up as an artist, right? I was just talking with someone on the Comic Jam. I don't know if you've referenced this ever, Christian, but the comicjam.com, where you can find your stories, my stories, Patrick's stories, tons of good stories, and a supportive comic creating community. Awesome. Talking with another artist there the other day, and we were talking about finding your voice. And there was just this kind of interesting moment of, actually, it's about the gaps in the script. Sometimes a writer will tell you they're wearing a blue hat and they're standing at this point in the frame and it's an over the hip shot. All of these details are prescribed for you. But when you're an artist, you're basically relegated to a space that is not prescribed. And that's been such an interesting thing, is, Patrick has the space that he leaves in between that I can fill in. And oftentimes that's interesting space that you didn't tell me what the costumes would really look like. But when I spent time sitting down and thinking about it and thinking about all the other details that are around it, that's so much more engaging, and that's so much more fun as a collaborator to work in that kind of environment.
Absolutely. And I could see that as you guys are going back and forth and building the script and building the world. So I teach, among other things, creative writing. And one of the things that I tell my students is that you hear about plot-driven stories, you hear about character-driven stories, and the hoity-toity will tell you that plot-driven stories are awful and they should only be character-driven stories. And all of that is wrong. A story should be character and plot-driven. The plot should be fascinating. It should be a fascinating idea that you've had. You can't say, well, the character is really interesting, so it doesn't matter what they're doing, which is, I know that's what wins Oscars, but still, it's got to be an incredibly interesting, complex character in an interesting situation, or an incredibly interesting character in an everyday situation that through them becomes even more interesting in the way they interact with it. And that's something that you did so well with a story that spans a number of years with little jumps in there as we move forward. And no world building. The world is built. And I think that's something that we've forgotten in this era of, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I love. I have a great time, but no snottiness about any of that. But there's something to be said about stepping into an established world and learning it as you go, not having to get all the history, all the backstory, all the blah. We get enough in As Below, So Above. We get enough in there that we walk in and we hear what they're talking about, and it's more philosophy than expository history, but you get the expository history, and then Jack comes in and fills in a lot of those background gaps with the art. And not because he's drawing in the background, here's what it took to get here. No, it's just the way he's created the materials, created the world, the costuming. And I was really impressed with how you guys together made this a world I could walk into, and I didn't have to feel like I had to wait for it to be built. Jack, talk to me a little bit about the designs.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest, most striking thing is really, for me at least, was the first panel, because that was the one I spent the longest period of time working on. Little bit of a spoiler here, maybe. We're on a city. We are in one city, one setting pretty much the entire time. And designing that city in a way that felt grounded, but also accessible, but also alien was really, that was just a fun experience. The way Patrick wrote it was really focused on spheres, but I also realized that there's some motion that we need. And so over the course of the story, I thought, yeah, we can't just do this shape that doesn't twist and turn. And so in my head, I'm designing these different items that might be able to twist and turn along with the world that we're looking at. And so coming up with just that first panel was really a thought of, all right, how does this object exist in the world itself that Patrick has built, has given some lore to, but also how does it exist within the story? Because ultimately as an artist, my role is to find ways that the character we're showing engages with the story that's happening to them and that they're affecting in turn. So just that design of the city for me was really striking. And I think it's one of my favorite panels out there. The other designs, I also wanted to feel cohesive, not just to what was happening to them. So yeah, the city should feel like something that could be affected by the world itself. That's important. But the characters should also have some sense of propriety, some sense of how do they belong in the world, some sense of hierarchy and order. And so how do I reflect that without telling you, without having a little button that says, hey, this character is wearing this color for this reason? Maybe we just imply it. Maybe we include that and have it be so consistent that people start to recognize that these two characters are associated with each other. And then over time, literally over time in the story, start to subvert that and say, okay, this character is changing, but in what way? I can't quite tell yet. Well, if you really pay attention to their designs, you'll start to see these very, very small, very subtle details that have changed about them that help sell some of that story. So long way of saying, how did I think about the design? It's because I thought about the story and I thought about where was Patrick leading us? One of the things I do with scripts when I get them is I read them 2 or 3 times before I start to put pen to page. And I think, what is the overarching story? And how does this fit together cohesively so that I can go back and craft 10 pages pretty quickly without having to worry too much that I'm deviating from continuity?
How often do you go back to Patrick?
Very routine. Yeah.
And it's usually in a way where, it's not like, what's nice is, once I submit a script, I'm not so married to it that I don't like the feedback or criticism or suggestions or anything like that. But the way Jack and I talk about it is it's such an immediate back and forth where we can logically approach it together. And that's when kind of those nice details start to really get fleshed out because we can talk through them so easily.
Yeah.
I've found with Jack that Jack, you'll ask me questions about how things work. That I, listening to you now explain it, was like, well, yeah, because you're picturing how they're going to work, how you're going to represent them visually on the page, and it makes you think of a lot of the logistics. And you ask me those logistics questions a lot, and it always opens up the story for me. Patrick, I'm a drafter. I write a lot of drafts. Do you do the same? And how much, the follow-up question is, how much did you cut of backstory from the first draft to the last?
So the way I approach things is I'm very conscious of the amount of space that we have. So I knew with the length of story, I'd have to be, very conservative in what I'm doing with each page. So what I do for something short like this is I do everything in chunks. So with a story like this, where we're in this time period, this happens, then we jump to here, this happens, et cetera, et cetera. So I had to be very conscious of like, okay, well, this can only take so much time. This can only take so much time because we need to get to this point, and that's going to take some space because it's going to have a lot of art to it. So the way I did it is I kind of literally outline into chunks, and then I kind of like don't let myself become a slave to like, world building or backstory or anything, because that's the kind of thing that I need to show through dialogue or visuals. So I kind of approach that as a goal right up front.
On draft one, you're worrying about space. You're thinking about space.
Yeah, that's kind of my thing. Cause like, I can throw out ideas all day and I can just keep dumping things on. But if I do that, it'll take forever to finish anything. So I literally am just focused on like, what do I need right now?
I've always appreciated that too about the way your scripts are built, is that I think it's not meant as a pejorative, but people can take it that way, that they're very spare. You
grab my charger. 1 second.
Yeah, get out of here. The details that are needed are the ones that you get
as a pejorative.
Well, we've dealt with each other. We know how this works. But the details that Patrick gives are limited in a good way, right? It's only the essentials. I think this is great, by the way. This physical entertainment in the background is just awesome.
We're going to put the Benny Goodman music in the background.
Yeah.
Sorry, you always expect batteries are going to last more than they do.
Oh, yeah. No, I was just complimenting your script writing skills. Such florid language, always really extra prosy. The amount of references and photo materials that I provided in a like physical dossier that you mailed to me, it's just awesome. But it actually makes my life really easy, because I have gotten scripts that are overwrought with details. It's not to say every long script is a bad script, but details that I don't care about. Like, do I care that a person has skinny legs and they have a brown shirt on if it's not going to be relevant to the story? Absolutely not. And for me as an artist, like, there are a few moments of joy where I get to pick the color of a shirt, but just giving me that freedom, that, maybe a false sense that I have some impact on the story is huge. That's really liberating. So when I get a script from Patrick, I know that he's already thought about space. He's already thought about pacing and rhythm. And very, very infrequently have I had to go back and say like, hey, you're cramming 5 panels here, or you've got an establishing shot and you want on the same row something that's going to take up half the row as well. There's just no way to fit those things. Usually that space has been thought through, and I can either tweak the angle or find another way of drawing it so that it leads the reader across the page pretty effectively.
Skinny legs, brown shirt. I'm going to write a story for
that
you.
Into a story.
That is it's essential that it must be the case in every frame. I do my best when I'm writing to think that way as well. But I've also, one of the freedoms I've given myself, getting used to working collaboratively is, and Jack has been essential with this. I'll put things in there saying, you know what, maybe I'll get called on this and I'll deal with it then, but I'll think about it then. Do I need this? Did I explain this? Is this going to travel and fit on the page? I'll do everything in my power to make it work. But if I get stuck, I've given myself permission to leave it, because I know that the artist, like James, will see it instantly. James will be like, how the hell is this going to happen? And there's something magic about that moment The minute that said to me, I'm like, oh yeah, no, it won't work. I know what to do. I could have been stuck on it for a week, but the minute somebody else calls me on it, I'm like, I got it. Hold on. So I've just decided to leave that part of the process there. This story is so much fun. You keep talking about the opening panels, and I love them. The closing panels are some of my very favorites that you have ever drawn. There is a pathos in the characters' eyes, body language, facial expression, and the composition of each panel, like the last 3 panels. That is some of the deepest, and I am a fan of your work, that I've seen you get. And what's interesting, for those of you that don't know, go on Twitter to what is it, Real Jack? What is it?
Real _ Jack VT.
VT.
It's sort of like a funny Stan Lee reference of like, oh, real Stan Lee. Obviously, there's somebody who's going to impersonate me, the famous Jack Van Thomme.
So if you go there, in October of 2022, Jack did a Lord of the Rings series of Inktober's, and he did them 2021, I believe, as
and
well.
28, I think since 2018 or something like that.
And you may be doing them coming up after this, when this video is airing.
Probably.
There's so much love that you have for Lord of the Rings that I've seen that level, that the last panels of as above, so below. Or as below, so above. Sorry,
just as above.
As above.
Yeah.
That's it. Sorry.
Yeah.
I've seen that level of pathos in those drawings, and because I can feel your love for Lord of the Rings. There's a storyline that one you did with Boromir, a more extended comic, and I recognized that love in these last panels of As Above, and I thought to myself, Jack loves this script. And Jack wanted to work with Patrick. Patrick wanted to work with Jack. And this is why. There's another level of emotion in this comic that is just tremendous. So, folks, Containment Breach of Clouds and Ether. You get to see the work of Patrick Hicks and Jack Van Thomme, who have done something really incredible. And I'm honored. I don't often get to get these conversations going with the writer and the artist together. And I'm honored to have gotten to talk to both of you. Folks, you want to check this out. Patrick, where do we find you in the ether sphere?
The best place to find me is my Instagram, which is Patrick Hicksby, which is Patrick Hicks with a PY at the end of it. That's kind of my main thing. I don't do Twitter. So if anybody looking for me, that's kind of where the finished products for the Comic Jam, I post a lot of those on there, and usually just some other snippets of whatever I'm working on if they come up. Terrific.
Any website, or are we just focused on it?
Working on it because I'm working on a bigger scale project that's going to need one soon.
Okay. Is that something? It is currently probably, let's say May of 2023 right now at this exact moment. Is there anything you want to mention, or is it still under wraps?
Still under wraps for now. It's a part 1/part 2 thing happening right now, where part 2 is under construction and part 1 is being edited. So we'll see what happens in the next few months here.
So we've got to go to Instagram right now.
It's a big sculpture, right? You're making an enormous sculpture.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And Jack, where do we go to find all the Jack that we need?
Right there over your shoulder. No, you go to Twitter, you go to Instagram, you look up at real _ Jack VT, and you will see some of the most drawings that I've ever made. They're all the good ones are there. The dog, there's a bear, there's comics, there's me being sort of a reply guy at podcasts that I follow and that I enjoy. So it's all there. If you want that good commentary and the good sassing, that's where you'll find me.
There you go. Folks, you want to check these folks out, and you want to get on this book. This story, As Above, is so good. There's so many levels to it. Well, literally with the plot, but there's so much to it, and it's part of an incredible book. Folks, we are Fugitive Poems, and we make comics.